I think we are ready for the next session now. And as we all know, EPNoSL is a network of practitioners, researchers, educators, and policymakers. That means that we have quite a lot of representatives from Ministries. Not enough, but we've got quite a lot, and they're good. This is the first time we really tried to put them on the stage to listen to their voices too. The question or the theme here is school leadership in education and policy reform. So it is going to be a panel discussion or presentation, whatever, and it is going to be led by Giovanna Barsano. Giovanna, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Lisa. So I was asked to lead this session, including policymakers, representatives from the Ministry of Education in their country. And before starting, just to set the scene, I would like to make an Italian example. Representing the situation of a head teacher, a rather typical head teacher in Italy, a very updated situation, where you can see the shift in terms of responsibilities of a head teacher in the last 6 years. Just a minute to have a look at the figures and at the numbers. And I also have the pleasure to tell you that the head teacher on which we are focusing is here with us, Massimo, that you know, just to give you an idea of what the landscape of policy is.
What's the last line? What does it
Just a joke.
That was how we did age 24, you know that?
It's just a joke.
He works at night as well.
No, I mean, these are not the working hours. They are the available hours. It's just to say that in 6 years' time, the same professional earns more or less the same salary with a very low increment and has twice as much responsibility for the same salary in the same context. So 4 school sites rather than 1, 1,400 students rather than 730, and so on. This is just to say that all our discourses on policies are constrained by the conflict between policies. So we can say whatever we want about what we aim in terms of leadership for learning, leadership for equity, but all these very idealistic, sometimes very idealistic and positive policies are then conflicting with other policies due to the spending reviews and to the different clustering, so that it is very difficult to strike the balance, because if you have twice, but this is very real, it's not a simulation, it's something which is really occurring in the same moment. So within this context, just on the ground with what we have said this morning, I would like to ask the participants in this panel a couple of questions, but I would also like to specify that we are not talking here, we are just making a sort of brainstorming, and we are not talking on behalf of our ministries. We are just sharing our professional expertise, thinking that if we are assuming that if we agree with what has been said and what has been discussed in the last sessions about equity, autonomy and distributed leadership, and we figure out what the scenario of our institutional context is, what does come to our mind with respect to the challenges that these ideas confront us with, if we want to make our best to implement, to enact the ideas that we share. So I have a couple of questions derived from a list of relevant questions which were set in the by the network, and I would like to ask you to answer very briefly, 2 minutes each, because if we want to tackle 2 questions, this is very important. From 2 viewpoints. The first one is the viewpoint of our own reality in our country. And the second point, which would be relevant, is with respect to the EPNoSL network. How do we think, very briefly, on the top of our mind, that the ideas presented and discussed in the EPNoSL network, in a big European network, could, to some extent, support the enactment of policies with respect to leadership for learning and the equity in our country? How could we make use of these discussions, these ideas in our country? The first question is concerns autonomy, school autonomy and distributed leadership. What kind of policy challenges do we think these ideas are confronting us with in our reality?
That's my question?
Yes.
Okay. I come from Slovenia. Vlasta Poličnik. I represent the Directorate for Preschool and Elementary School Education. And the topics we were talking about here are being discussed in our country as well. About the policy challenges in broadening school autonomy and distributed leadership, of course, I have to say that autonomy, as we know, always goes with accountability. I have to say that in our country there are school heads who are not enthusiastic about too much autonomy. They would rather have everything prescribed. Of course, it is not our policy to do it. We would like to have creative, reflective head teachers who practice innovative ways of leading the schools, and with that reach better results, better outcomes of the pupils and the teachers as well.
Thank you. And how do you think that the ideas of the network could be useful for that?
To be used in our country in the future? That's the question?
With which tools, yes.
With which tools? Of course, I believe that we have to communicate these things as well as we can, because the policymakers and the head teachers and the teachers and the trainers have to understand the issues in the same way, so that we can proceed with the activities together. We have to understand the meaning of these things, and we have to go in the same direction with support, of course, from each other.
Thank you.
I'm from Belgium, from Vilnius. And similar to the Netherlands, we have a system that gives a lot of autonomy to schools and school leaders. As a government, we provide financement, a minimal set of standards for pupils to reach, a very minimal set for school leaders. And recently we've been thinking about the figure of the school leader as the key figure in the school, and what can we do about it as a government. But I think, personally, we must be very aware that we're not going the other way, that we are not going to grasp the autonomy away from the schools and saying, we as government, we know what's best for you, so we will set standards, criteria, etc., and you just have to apply them. That's a question that we are struggling about. But we are also in a rather particular situation. Within 6 months we have elections in Belgium for new government. So at the moment we are practically at a standstill. So we have time to think, we have time to prepare the next government, but it's hard to say which way we will go in the future. And regarding this network, we've been seeing it as a source to use, to extract ideas from. So that's for the moment our objective, and our participation lies in gathering ideas and networking in the real sense, networking.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Paul Hamilton from Scotland, and I'm not from a ministry. I'm an imposter. I am an imposter. I'm not from a ministry. I'm from an organisation called the General Teaching Council for Scotland, which is an independent organisation. I'm not a civil servant, but my organisation has many of the functions that ministries will have in some of the countries represented here. We register teachers, we set the standards, and so on. In terms of autonomy and accountability, I think in Scotland the reality is that while head teachers have some autonomy, they don't have terribly much, because they're working within a local system and indeed within a national system. And we are a small country, so it's fairly easy for us to have something that is fairly common across the whole country. What we've been doing as the GTC to try and encourage distributed leadership is to write into all of the standards. And we have standards for students when they're completing their teacher education in university, standards for when they reach the end of their probation period, standards for their continuing professional learning, standards for middle leadership and headship. We've tried to write into all of these elements of leadership so that we're growing our leaders as they progress through their careers. And in that way, we hope, and it is a hope, that distributed leadership can become a reality. However, when you listen to some of the things that we've heard over the last couple of day and a half year, there is the danger of distributed leadership being a nice, easy term to bandy about and not actually put into practice. Andy Hargreaves, in some of his writing, talks about contrived collegiality, and I think there's the danger of a kind of contrived distributed leadership framework as well. It maybe looks good, but isn't actually all that effective. In terms of what the network can do, it helps to find out about other countries. Absolutely, it really does help to find out about other countries. But it also helps other countries to ask you questions about the things that you just take for granted about your own system. And that makes you think about the rationale of why you've got what you've got in your own country. And that seems to me to be a plus.
Thank you.
My name is Wolfgang Meyer. I'm not from the ministry either, nor am I from the Lower Saxony State Institute for Quality Development in Schools. I worked for it until July this year. This is a subsidiary institution to the Ministry of Education. Sometimes even they listen to us, but most of the time they tell us what to do. And I can only speak for Lower Saxony. 7.5 million inhabitants out of the 81 in Germany. There are 16 federal states. The federal government doesn't have any competencies in school education. That's written down in our constitution. And the ministries of education in the 16 Länder wouldn't accept any directives from Berlin, neither from Brussels, because they are keen to keep their independence. However, they work together in a number of areas like core curricula, standards in various subjects, and in large-scale assessments, nationwide, country, statewide, and even like OECD, a large-scale assessment internationally. In 2007, the Lower Saxony Ministry of Education thought themselves at the spearhead of school development in Germany when they introduced the so-called self-responsible school. This was an amendment to the Lower Saxony school law, so it was a decision of the Lower Saxony Parliament, and several of the other regulations that can be altered by the Ministry of Education were consequently amended. This self-responsible school is a form of organization that is voluntary. So the schools have the choice if they follow the existing set of regulations that are published by the ministry and that are binding, or if they want to develop their own rules for their school that is tailor-made to their framework and the area, the focus they want to give the school, etc. So it's about planning, implementation, and testing achievements, etc. Some of the key elements are core curricula and assessment, meaning that there is in return for giving more autonomy to the schools, the state expects accountability and the results of work have to be proven. Lower Saxony also developed a framework of school quality, which is binding for the schools and gives them a framework for self-evaluation. On the other hand, talking about distributed leadership, Lower Saxony is one of the very few states in Germany that gives schools the opportunity to opt for a kind of team leadership structure in the school. There is still one official head of the school, but he can adopt a team that is really officially in their positions. But this has to be applied for at the school administration, at the regional level, and also the community has to give its okay so it can be implemented. This is the first step towards an institutionalization of distributed leadership in schools, but only a few schools. We were talking about it, how many schools it could be. I reckon it's something that in between 5 and 10% maximum, because schools are in some cases very traditional institutions, and it's difficult that change management is a problem for them.
Thank you. I'm Kaspar from the Estonian Ministry of Education. From Estonia. And of course, we're dealing with the same issue here, the school leadership issue and student outcomes. And I think biggest good thing for us is to see different solutions. Same problem of different solution, and it's different. It's good. On the other hand, our schools are very autonomous. We have the same standards like Tom said for our teachers, competence model for head teachers. We're structuring our legal acts. We have new requirements for teachers and head teachers. And I think we have all tools, but not only tool will work. We must figure it, and we must give not just tool, but support to work. I think it's very important for us. not just finding new tool, but no support or no finding the right person to lead school.
And about the network?
About network, it's useful thing, because we are so different and at the same time so big area are in common all children. It's good.
Good afternoon. My name is Diogo and I came from the Portuguese Secretary of State for Teaching and Management of Education. We are a recent partner of the EPNoSL, and Kathy makes me a great surprise for the year speaking about the Portuguese reality. My first word is in Portugal now we face what I call the educational silent revolution about concerning autonomy in order to improve school autonomy. When we arrived 2 years ago at the Ministry of Education, we have at the national level 22 schools with contract autonomy celebrated with the Ministry of Education and Science, and 2 years ago we have now 200 schools with contracts autonomy celebrated, and which means 25% of schools of the unities of management of the Portuguese system of education are now contracts celebrated with the minister and perhaps with other partners and stakeholders of the community. So it's why I mean by a silent revolution, because this is giving the first steps, but we believe that it can be a great change in order to improve the school results, prevent the absenteeism, and promote a more equitable system of schooling in Portugal. Naturally, that the goals and the content of the contracts are quite different, and they are related with the nature of the school's educational projects. As a condition to celebrate the contracts, schools must have a school educational project, which means clear goals defined, and also a strategic plan to achieve that goals. So, and for another hand, schools must have a self-evaluation system in practice. So this is the two conditions in order to celebrate, two conditions that we think can facilitate the improvement of the schools. However, especially, let me use my document that helps me. In the peripheric and suburban areas of the big cities of Lisbon and Porto, and also in the rural areas on the country, there is many projects that are established in order to implement the more equity and inclusive approach of teaching and learning. Many of that schools present goals and practices in their action plans that intentionally shows a clear idea in order to support children at risk and to minimize the gap between poor and advantaged children. Some examples of such strategies are additional pedagogical support, individualized teaching, more adequate teaching strategies, extracurricular oriented to education for all, and adequate and individualized support to the pupils with educational special needs that have many times support of specialized technicians. And especially schools must have educational projects oriented to promote a culture of collaboration between all ecosystems that participate in the education of a child. As the Chinese proverb says, we know very well, we need an entire village to educate a child. Understanding that many autonomy projects present interesting dynamics of collaboration between schools, families, and communities. We believe that we are on the right track, but only the future and the monitoring and evaluation of the system can give the right answer.
Okay, I'll try to be faster. My name is Eliška and I come from the Czech Republic, but I'm not from the ministry. I work for an institution for in-service training of teachers, and we are financed by the ministry. So first I would like to describe you the situation in the Czech Republic, because I think it could be an interesting lesson for the network as well. Because circa 10 years ago, the Czech school heads was given a huge autonomy. The autonomy is probably as big as the autonomy in Netherlands, but the Czech schools don't get too much support from the government, from the ministry. So they have a lot of tasks, a lot of duties, but very little support. And after 10 years, we can see the results of this situation in the Czech Republic. We have no standards for school heads. We have no standards for teachers. As you said, you have in Scotland, we have standards for everything. So we have standards for nothing. And coming to that is also a curriculum reform was introduced in the Czech schools, in the Czech educational system. So now we are in a very difficult situation. The school leaders are in a difficult position, and according to some recent surveys, they don't have any time to focus on learning and on improvement on learning at schools, because they have so many administrative and operational tasks. So the lesson from this situation could be that if we give autonomy to schools, we also have to give enough support or appropriate support to the school heads. And also a good lesson from this network could be that all stakeholders should be involved. It's not a problem just of school leaders, it's a problem of the whole educational society. So I think this is good. Thank you very much.
Hello, I come from Greece. I am from the Institute of Education Policy, which is not the ministry, but it's a public body that works for the ministry. We operate, let's say, like an official advisor for the ministry. Greece could not be characterized as a country that leaves autonomy to its school units. We have a highly centralized system. The ministry designs, decides, and implements legislation. And in every school we have the same curriculum, the same textbooks for all the pupils, and we have to do the same subjects from A to Z in a certain period of time. But we have another kind of autonomy. We have several educational programs for the last 20 years or so, such as environmental programs or health programs, where both the school leader and teachers in the school have full autonomy on how to do it. They decided on their own, they implement how they like it. And the funny thing is that they don't, the ministry does not evaluate these programs. Teachers do as they like in this. What else? We have been trying to give space to schools for the last 5 or so years. The first steps have been made because we have changed the way schools have been financing. Some things, like as structural buildings things, they are financed through the city councils and the special committees there, where the head teacher takes part. And we have started a program that is called self-evaluation of school units, the educational work, which is, it tells them that the school needs to set its targets and see what the needs are and see what the resources are and what they can manage in the end of the year. And from here, I think, apart from being knowing what is happening in Europe and getting resources, it's very helpful for us to gain the way of thinking and the way of collaborating with each other.
I am Salvina, I come from Malta, and I can say that Malta and Spain learned the lesson about equity because we were sitting two and the rest of the group were there. But we managed to move the whole group here, so your first lesson has been achieved. And in Malta we have independent schools. They are fully paid by the parents' foundations, but the government subsidizes either through tax or through paying for special programs for special students. We have church-funded schools, but these are fully paid by the state. And then we have the state schools. I work in the ministry, and we are at a very interesting period because we are opening the legislation for discussion so that we can give more autonomy. And like you said, with an autonomy, we give support. Because we want our school leaders to become pedagogical leaders. It's no use talking about autonomy and then having them doing clerical duties. So that is a big challenge we have ahead. We also have a national curriculum framework, and we are in the state where we have invited stakeholders to write the way forward. But we have put only the framework, and it is open for discussion so that we can implement and see what this will be about. But actually, when we talk about equity, we talk about mental deficit. Because yesterday, when I was listening for the opening speech, and we heard the director of this university speaking in his own language, I was looking at his face, trying to think what he was telling us. I was looking at his mannerism, I was listening to his words, but I was also looking forward and very tense for the interpretation. And there I thought about the kids we have in those classrooms. When we speak to them in a language which they cannot understand. And for me it was minutes only, but we have kids who have to listen day in, day out to things that they cannot perceive, they cannot understand. So Malta is working on tapping mental deficit. In my time, I couldn't go to university simply because university was a phased payment. We have now opened university for everybody, and practically every household has got people who go to universities. So it could be my father who was a gardener, but it also could be the lawyer, and we were working together. So that is the way forward. As for this community, I think we can gain, and we can also give. We are embarking on a program of professional development for senior management team, because when we talk about leadership, we don't talk about the school head, but we also talk about school senior management team, so that is distributed leadership. So from the network, we are not yet members, but we hope to be, and I think we can contribute and they can support us in many ways. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Mr. Castilla. I'm in charge of the General Subdivision of Territorial Cooperation in the Ministry of Education of Spain. In Spain now we have quite a problem with education. because our results are not as good as I would like, as we would like. Sorry. We have thinking a lot about that, and at the end, one of the factors that it's very important is leadership. We have a very special way to select head teachers. The head teachers in our schools are elected by the own teachers of the same school, and it is very difficult to be a leadership in this situation. So now we are trying to improve this situation, and now the government is going to pass a new law, pass tomorrow, the next Thursday. The law is going to pass by the Congress. So now we are working in this law, and there are three principal words on it, that it is leadership, autonomy and accountability. So this is the way we are going to work, and even we are very worried about it, and we are trying to find a lot of ideas to grow up in this subject. And this is why we are joining this net. And even last week we had a congress in the EPN framework, where we are trying to show good practice, and we want to share it around all Europe, because we think that we can share and learn about each other in this framework. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think that we have had a very interesting overview, where there are some key words which are circulating, like accountability and self-evaluation, and we have had the chance in a short time to have an idea of how they are rooted in very different local contexts. I think that the first impression is also that support and resources are a main concern for everyone, and that in many cases, despite the good intentions of policies which have some interesting keywords and would like to aim at achieving equality, distributed leadership, I found it very interesting that some of you mentioned the difficulties not only on the part of the policymakers to conceive the policies, but on the part of the schools to endorse these ideas. There have been a few cases, but I found it very interesting. So I would now like to move to the second step, if we can try to be as quick as possible, because otherwise we will run out of time. And the next question is about professional development. How do we think that educational leaders would be well prepared with specific professional development activities in our countries to tackle the challenges of equality and democratic participation? Here I would have a proposal which came to my mind yesterday during the reflections, which would be to create a sort of roster of experts here in our network in order to make available, because if we assume that international speakers and researchers could circulate, which have a specific comparative mindset and who are used to dealing with core issues within a comparative framework. If we think that this kind of people could be very useful, rather than just a German traveling to Italy or to provide a picture of his country or so on, it could be very interesting to create a roster of experts from the network, together with a good set of resources conceived in a way that can take into account a multidimensional international perspective, to make it available for the countries who are interested in these resources and in these experts for their training national activities. This would be point, because it is really a problem in Italy. Everybody likes to invite someone from another country, but what these people can say is not always attuned with the situation. So it's just a curiosity, but maybe we can go farther than this. So let's start again very quickly.
So the question was professional development of head
Professional
teachers.
development with
Right?
respect to equity and distributed leadership in both perspectives.
Okay. In the last 20 years in Slovenia, we have developed quite a good system of training of the head teachers. It includes initial training, the first year mentoring, and further training of head teachers. But as the global situation is changing, of course, the schools are changing, and the duties, as we have already heard, of the principals, and of course they say they use most of the time for administrative tasks. Yes, and there is shortage of time for pedagogical leadership. So, what we are going to do in the ministry is to give maximum support to head teachers, and we have already discussed with them what they need most. And of course, we will try to prepare the training programs which will address their needs and help them to improve their leadership. And I think distributed leadership is one of the options. That's it.
Let's try and focus on the challenges rather than on the description, because unfortunately we are very short of time.
So I will be very short. One thing we did a few years ago was provide every school leader with an individual budget for his or her professional development to spend solely on that. In return, we just want some evidence of how they spend it, but for the rest, they can use it upon.
Okay. I've already mentioned the standards we have in Scotland. We have got one for headship, as I said. We also have a headship programme, two different routes to the standard for headships. One is a flexible route based on coaching, one is a university route. Both of those are under review at the minute. We've also got in development something called the Scottish College for Educational Leadership, and we hope that that's going to be a positive force for continued professional development for head teachers as well. Two things that we do that I think are worth mentioning. We've had for a long time a system of professional review and development in Scotland for all teachers. An annual interview looking at the progress they've made that year, setting targets for the next year, trying to move things forward. And that includes head teachers. So we have that expectation of our head teachers. And something that we're in the process of developing, and the GTC is in the process of developing, is what we're calling professional update, which is in essence a re-accreditation programme for all teachers, including head teachers. In the same way as in some of the states in America, for example, you need to re-license yourself. We're developing that kind of system in Scotland as well. But we most certainly do not want it to be seen as a punitive sanction. We're actually trying to put it forward very strongly as something that will be supportive of professional development.
Leadership preparation and CPD for school heads in Lower Saxony is one of the tasks of our institute, of the NO2. Another department is the school inspection. They will later assess the results of it somehow, but not for all schools, only for some isolated schools they pick. To give you an example of what the ministry did last year, the school year, the running school year started with the introduction of inclusive education in Lower Saxony. But inclusive education in Lower Saxony is only understood as including special needs children with either physical or mental disabilities to reduce the number of special solution on inclusive education. If it were inclusive education as it is understood, for example, in the province of New Brunswick in Canada and other Canadian provinces, it would be what we always call here equity in learning. But unfortunately, it's not the case, but it may be a first step. The method, how it was introduced, is not really a good example. It was the time of election campaign in Lower Saxony because the elections were in January this year. The government lost. The former Minister of Education hasn't found a new job yet. He lost his MP. And what he did was partly part of his election campaign, partly was it a number of big events for school heads in Lower Saxony, always something like 400, 500 in one day that got up-to-date information about the plans of the government. But this is nothing, and by this kind of procedure, it is impossible to change attitudes, and by changing attitudes, to change school culture as well. This needs much more time and much more effort. So there's a lot to do ahead.
Thank you. I must emphasize that, by my opinion, to access to be a school leader must be open. Previous qualification requirements for Estonia, most students were quite strong and overrated. Right now it's more open. And secondly, it's very important this CPD for the school heads. Not one size fits all courses, but it depends on the needs, special needs.
In Portugal, school leaders are teachers. Even in the top of the management, in the middle management structures, all of them are teachers. We have no professional management in Portugal. So the training that the leaders is the same of the other teachers. Initial training, in-service training, lifelong training. We have a lot of work to do on that, and that is one of the reasons that we are here to listen to the conclusion of EPNoSL and see what we can apply in our country. But I think that we can develop, now we have a new law of lifelong training in Portugal, and we can and we are open to develop a national program of leaders in order to develop the competences and profile of the leaders of our schools, top leaders and middle management leaders. But we believe that we have some measures that we can do that can improve the performance of the leaders, namely building networks of school leaders with the help of ICT to collect and disseminate good practices in the European countries. For me, it's very important. To use the support of critical friends. Some schools in Portugal have critical friends that came from the universities, and I think that it's a good measure. But I think that there is one thing that is strategic and fundamental for me, that is to promote a reflective thinking and on the school leaders. And mainly what this morning we talked about was the reflective thinking of our assumptions. To think deeply, to think inside of our thinking. It's for me the main reason, the main aspect that we can use to improve did school leadership in order to promote equity and justice in our schools.
Thank you. We only have 8 minutes, I think, maybe even less.
Okay, so in the Czech Republic we have obligatory initial training for school heads, and there is a variety of courses offered for school head teachers, but I think what we lack is a kind of individual support via mentoring or something like this, and we also do not support networking, and it could be national and also international networking, so that the school leaders can share experience, examples of good practice, and so that's the way we can improve.
We have some master's degrees, very few, on school leadership. We call it administration, school administration and management. The good step is that we have, I think it was last year, if I remember correctly, that we have an obligatory in-service training program for all managerial staff in education, which I must say they're all teachers. We don't have other kind of stuff. And I think this is a good thing for startups.
In Malta, to become a head of school, you have to have a diploma from university, but many of our teachers are now not only doing the diploma, but they are doing the masters. So they have a lot of theory. What we are embarking from the ministry side is CPD in actual realities, you know, in making them feel what it is like to be treated against a minority, or to make them feel about and discuss creativity and how to move forward and take certain initiatives, even considering the risks that they have to take when they take such initiatives. We also are discussing sabbatical year. It will be in this year that we can start to give sabbatical year for teachers and for head teachers.
Thank you. In Spain we have also training at the beginning to become a head teacher, but after that, as I said before, we want to go one step forward. So now to become a head teacher, you should need a specific training and a specific degree. And in the new ideas, we want to share good experience, good leaderships, person to put them in touch, and to spread all these good experiences and good practice. And this is our next chapter.
Thank you very much. I think it was very sharp, but maybe because of this, also because of this, quite meaningful. I think that we have, the impression is that there is a lot of attention with respect to the issue of professional development, but once again we are facing quite a few contrasts, among which the most important is, which is quite popular in the literature on leadership, I think, is the contrast between the more pedagogical and let's say psychological and roles linked to the teaching profession and the managerial aspects of leadership. And I think that in this respect, professional development, the way the professional development is organized is quite important. In particular, because what we have heard yesterday is very much focused about the need of nurturing a culture of sharing against and trying, to break the trend towards recipes, and also the idea of good practices and best practice, I think, is becoming, which was a key word in the European community, is becoming a little bit more ambiguous and dangerous in the light of these ideas. So I think that some of you mentioned the idea of school culture of a professional development aimed at improving school culture. And I think that this will be an essential recommendation, an essential message from the network, because quite a few things we have said seem to be simple, but are in fact quite complex and problematic. And also all the sharing ideas, the sharing of practices, and the way ideas arise themselves from a situation of confrontation and from a possibility of discussing is quite difficult to be enacted, and it requires specific strategies which has to be identified and probably also narrated and described with specific initiatives. And there must be space. What we are seeing here is that the numbers tell us that while we are discussing this with all our passion, there are situations when it is very difficult. So I'm afraid that we are...
I have one question. Is it in 2007 the same school head as it was in 2013?
We have the witness there. Yes. Yes.
So the same head teacher in 2007?
Yes, exactly.
And he's still alive?
He's there. But this is just a background for all our discourse. So I think that this is all.